Tilian, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making time for this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Where are you living these days?
I moved to Orlando, Florida a couple of years ago from LA.
Got it. Okay, so I thought you mentioned Eastern time. So what made you move?
Um, I guess several factors. I mean, I met my wife and she lives here. That was number one.
Pretty good reason.
Um, yeah, pretty good reason. And then also just in terms of like building a place for the future and like being able to have a family in the future, Florida just seemed like a much better option than LA. And I still go to LA all the time for work. So it's kind of, I definitely miss it in certain aspects, like just the energy of it. I'm probably an LA defender, definitely compared to people who live here. Because, I say, yeah, I lived in LA for 14 years. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. It's like, no, it was great. It was awesome.
Well, not that many people, people in LA, especially people who are from California, complain about LA, but they don't leave.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess they kind of did during like 2020 to
Right.
2020. Yeah, because that was a little bit rough in LA, where you're like, oh wow, the rest of the world is opened up except for us in New York and Michigan.
Yeah, Washington, where I live, we had the longest like lockdown. It was until like March of 2021 or 22. No, March of 22, I think. It was super late. Yeah. So I guess let's start with what people really want to know, which is you and Gavin Dance obviously have parted ways. I had them on and they sort of gave their side of things. So what's your side of it? Why did you guys choose to part ways?
Um, there's definitely a lot of factors. It's complicated, and I think I'm going to keep like our individual conversations private, but I can say kind of how I've dealt with it and how I feel about it. I think it had run its course. There has been a lot that's gone on in the last few years. And kind of the fallout to that is somewhat of a factor of just it was the last couple of years were just extremely stressful for me and stressful for everybody. But I'm extremely grateful for like the entire 12 years that I've spent with them. And we've all made peace. I mean, I can't speak for them, but I've definitely made peace. And there's no bad blood. There's no like animosity, I think, on either side. And it's time for something new for all of us. And I think they kind of have a little bit of muscle memory and success, even with finding new singers.
One of the very, very, very rare bands who have pulled that off multiple times.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I don't know. Some of it might be luck. Some of it might be the insane talent that they all have. So, and then, I'm in a new stage where I've done a new album. I've actually been working on it for years and years, but once that it became official to us a lot earlier than it became official to the public. So we all knew it was coming. And
like
I was
you had made that decision, or you just sort of knew it was coming?
No, the decision was made. Yeah, the decision was made like months prior to when we announced it. So pretty much the majority of my new album writing, I knew it was happening. Yeah, and I don't know, like the tag words like creative differences. As you can imagine, every relationship is extremely complicated, and every break creates every emotion that you can possibly think of. And people splitting, you know what I mean? I felt relieved at first, worried, anxious, I felt bitter at times, but mostly just put that into music. And then just kind of, you know, living with the reality for a good amount of time, because it was an awesome time in my life. Like it was, and I know it's over, and then I don't see a future where we get back together.
Right.
Well, based on the conversations that we all had, and like I said, the details of that are private, but I wish I could give like a one sentence answer. This is exactly why things went this way, but it's honestly not that simple. It wasn't that simple even for the last year of us touring. Last year I was in the band.
Well, being in a band is, and or being business partners with people, like it really is more like a marriage than like a job, right? Because I mean, I have business partners and we fight, you know, we love each other, but we fight and get mad at each other on a personal level, and then we make up and get back together and all that kind of shit. And I mean, it's like you said, you can experience all these emotions, and from the outside, I mean, I've interviewed both of you guys now, but I don't know anyone in the band personally. It seems to me like, you know, when two people get a divorce and it was kind of maybe messy at one point, but you're like, they seem happier on their own now.
Right. Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. So I feel like the stage I'm in now is like kind of reestablishment, and I kind of had to get this solo album off my chest, so to speak, because it was kind of just already in motion and burning inside. And now that it's done, now that I'm like turned into the masters and like ready for collaboration, I can see myself doing another band, multiple bands, more collaborations, more projects.
So you don't, what are your plans now? Do you sort of, are you going to be a solo artist, and if other things come along, you'll take them, or what's sort of the plan? Or is there one? Well,
yeah, the plan now is to do this album cycle, this tour, this Tilian album. I can refer to it in the third person because it's the project name.
Right.
And probably do this tour that was just announced, and then another one in the spring.
I didn't see the tour. What is it?
It announced like maybe 2 hours ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's okay. It's a 3/4 US run that hits some bigger cities, some smaller towns, but I'll probably fill out the other parts that we missed in the spring. And at the same time, I have collaborations in the works already for just working with bands that it would be fun to work with. And then I imagine I'm going to put my focus in like starting a new collaborative project after that.
Does that mean a band, or does that mean Tilian plus whoever's around? Or
it's a band. It would be a band. Okay. I've got some ideas, but nothing's really. Yeah.
What makes you want to do a band? And I only ask because, I mean, you have such a following as an individual. You have a lot of talent, obviously, and just like logistically and economically, if I was going to try to be a professional musician, I would probably rather be a solo artist. What's your sort of thinking there?
Well, I guess, you know, there's a difference between like working with different producers and kind of getting influence in that, and then just working with like incredible artists who can do things that you can't do.
Right.
So I think it's more of a creative thirst that I have to be able to work with, I don't know, guitarists, musicians, drummers, maybe even other singers that like they have their own strengths that complement mine, as opposed to me kind of driving everything and writing everything and collabing to a certain extent. and obviously, I don't have the reach that like a Post Malone has, where he's like,
Well, I
well,
mean, like 5 people do. Yeah.
yeah, where I can just, well, I want to do an album in this genre, so I'm going to get the world class musicians from that genre,
Right.
and just do that. Like, it's so collaboration will probably come in features, but the hunger for like a project where everything's kind of fresh and starting from zero is really appealing.
Got it. Okay. Well, I do want to talk about the new record, but and I have some questions about that, but I'm just curious. So you mentioned the creative differences thing before. They mentioned that when I talked to him too. And without trying to create any drama, I'm just genuinely curious. What can you say about what those creative differences might be?
Yeah, we had done a ton of albums together. I felt like Jackpot Juicer kind of was the perfect embodiment of that era. And like I said, they tend to swap members out. It's just in their history. And I think we all kind of saw it coming.
Just because, like, what are you going to do? 5 more versions of that album?
Yeah, exactly. So
Right.
I think a fresh start for both of us is going to be really cool. And then, it's possible that down the road we do a tour or something. It's not like the bad blood is deep or anything. So I think we all left off on a decent point. As decent.
Like, who knows? You break up, and who knows? Maybe we can still be friends. And if you run into each other at Target, you nod and you're like, "Hey, how's it going?" You're like, "All right, well, I gotta go."
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it really doesn't. Again, I don't know any of you guys personally, but from talking to you guys, it genuinely doesn't seem like at this point there's a lot of bad blood. It doesn't seem like that's a PR answer to me.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, that's just the way it is. I think obviously there's emotional elements that come and go, like
Sure.
any breakup. I'm not always like even keeled and perfectly balanced emotionally about it, but I've at least gone through that process and got to go through that process while making an album. So
I mean, it's 12 years of your life. I don't think anybody would just walk away from it, without having an emotional roller coaster.
right. Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned before sort of being fearful, meaning that, there's, doubt as to whether you can make it as a solo artist or like what, tell me about that part.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's been lots of doubt that comes and goes. I'm confident at times, maybe overconfident at times, and then anxiety kicks in, and you picture the worst. And I'm kind of in a reestablishment phase, so it's exciting. It's an adventure, but it's also daunting.
I mean, I don't think you're going to have any problems as long as you keep working hard, which it seems like you do. I mean, we'll talk about the album in a minute, but you hit the ground running with that. I mean, I think Gavin Dance fans are probably like the most loyal fans on the planet other than maybe Tool or something. So I think, and obviously there's various different factions within the fandom, but I have a hard time thinking that as long as you keep doing what you're doing, that there's going to be a lot of people that support you.
Yeah, definitely. And I even have, this was over a decade ago, but when Johnny first left the band, he made an awesome first album, and it was received really well. And I think if he would have kept that momentum going and rode off of that first album, he would be in a great spot. And
he is so fucking good. Like, I think he might be the single like best vocalist in like the entire genre. He's so fucking good. Obviously on a personal level he's got some issues, but fuck, he's good.
Yeah, it seems like he's getting those in order more and more now too. So I think the future's bright for him. Obviously, like, and I've had my own struggles. He's had his struggles, and you can't. It's impossible to be perfect all the time. But he's fucking, yeah, his talent is.
And God does not give with both hands. That's like a big thing I've learned over the past 10 years or so. Like anybody you know that's like super talented, they're fucking weird and dysfunctional in some kind of way. Everyone has their own, but like everybody who's super, super exceptionally good at anything is fucking weird and fucked up in some other way.
I mean, to get exceptional at anything, you have to put in kind of irrational hours into it, irrational, like, focus on it. And then other aspects of your life, I mean, just automatically start to lack.
Yeah. I mean, think about like pro athletes, for example, like they have no life, right? You know, since they're like 5 years old, all they do is their sport. That's it. Mm-hmm. So of course, you know, the other parts of their life are going to lag. And same with musicians. You know, musicians, let's say there's lots of people that start touring when they're like 16, 17, 18, and they've done nothing but that for 10 or 15 years. Of course, they're not like normal adults.
Right. Yeah.
How could they be?
Yeah. And they don't, that's the other thing, is usually there's not anybody there to, like, unless they get into like a good marriage early on or something, like there's not a mirror for people necessarily. Hey, you're fucking up. This is going to fuck you over later if you keep down this path. Like deep down, everybody knows it, but you know.
But you don't necessarily really know, because if you're around a bunch of other people that are doing similar things and you're like, well, like I probably should reel in a little bit, but I guess it's not that bad because everyone else is kind of doing something close.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But it never lasts. Dancing with the devil never lasts.
No, it sure doesn't. You play with fire long enough and you are going to get burned 100% of the time, and there are no exceptions. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the new record. Because I listened to it. You sent it to me the other day. And it was a little bit different than what I was kind of expecting. I'm not sure why, but for some reason I was expecting it to be a little bit more pop, whereas I would say it's definitely like a rock album, which it actually kind of reminds me of Tides of Man, maybe a little bit less prog than that, but not dissimilar to me. How would you describe it for anybody who is interested? Obviously nobody's heard it yet. How would you describe it, and where did that kind of direction come from?
The album was a lot of years in the making. So, but everything was flexible. So I actually started it in 2021, like at the end of the year, and went to Portland, and just like, I was in a really good writing flow musically, not vocally. And I just had all these ideas, and I was like, there was a time period where I was just playing guitar all the time and just constantly creating and working. So I went to Portland with Chris Kremet and essentially put down a bunch of demos, like instrumental demos, in between a Gavin Dance tour and recording Jackpot Juicer. And then I sat on those for a while. And just end of last year, went into the studio with Zach Jones in LA, and we kind of made sense of those and started a bunch of new song ideas. And I think it's hard to say like what the genre wound up being, but what we were kind of going for is really powerful, like low end and kind of hard hitting music, not quite heavy, but a little less like tame, I guess. So there's definitely some rock and heavy elements on it. But then we wanted the vocals to be pretty front center,
right,
polished. Yeah. And I don't, even through Tides of Man, Gavin Dance, and even past solo music, I don't think there were that many songs where the vocals were just the complete centerpiece, and everything there is powerful behind it, but just maybe bumping up the vocals a little bit.
Well, if anybody that's ever watched my streams or whatever, I'm always complaining that the vocals are not loud enough in like every single fucking mix now, because for some reason, I think it's because every mixer is a fucking guitarist. So it's always like the guitars are super loud. They've got these really like punchy, gent drums, and the vocals are like an afterthought. So when I heard your album, I was like, oh, thank God, finally someone that's fucking putting the vocals front and center where they should be. I mean, especially for you.
Yeah, luckily I was the guitarist. I mean, KJ Strock was also the guitarist on some of the songs, but so I didn't have that clash with ego. I was like, no, I like my vocals a lot more than my guitar. Right. Let's put that front and center, and let's make that audible. And I think that's actually the biggest difference in my eyes between this album and any of my past albums. Is like
the vocals are very, very, very present in a good way.
Yeah, and I like learned to be okay, because in the past, like I'm like, oh well, I made that that synth part and that guitar part, and I want everything to be like this nice magical blend.
But you got to pick something.
But yeah, I kind of started to learn to let go. Like I played a lead over this. Can't really hear it. That's fine. I don't care. Like
it's still there. You hear it even if you don't hear it.
It's creating the vibe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the cool thing about this album is I had just a lot of time. I wasn't going to rush it. I went out to Portland and LA multiple times. I wrote a bunch at home. I even recorded some of the stuff at home.
Oh, wow.
So it was just like this longer patience project that was really fun to make.
I'm surprised to hear, given that, like we talked about, the vocals are like clearly the centerpiece of this album. And that you're a vocalist. I'm surprised to hear that you wrote it instrumentally first. Is that normally how you write, or tell me about that?
Not all the songs. I think it's historically probably 50-50. Like I'll like pick up the guitar and think of a vocal first sometimes, and then build around it. But I think exploring a new genre, or what I think is a new genre to me, at least, or for me to do, I think it was helpful to kind of get a sound first. And then you're like, okay, cool. This is kind of what the album is mostly going to sound like. Now I'll start working on vocals, and then some other songs came vocally first, but not the majority on this one.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because again, that's one of my sort of complaints with a lot of rock music these days is like it's really obvious that a guitarist wrote it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just interesting to hear that you would even do that sometimes, but obviously because of you being a vocalist, like you said, you don't have that clash of egos where it's going to end up being guitar music for other guitarists.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't mind having a project, because I like guitar music a lot.
Sure.
So I wouldn't mind having another project, another album that focuses on that. Like,
yeah, nothing wrong with that. It's just like, I just hear so much of it. It's like, can we please not just always do that?
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
Would you ever, you have such a like pop sensibility to your vocals. I would love to hear you do like just a straight, like pure pop album.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't come out of me. It would have to, in that case, it would also have to be a collaboration. Like I would have to work with a pop producer. Because
would you be interested in trying it?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely written some pop songs. They always have some other flavor to them than straight pop.
Right.
I don't know. Like, I feel like pop in general, there's subgenres of pop now too. So a pop something. Yeah, I could see myself doing that for sure. I'm a big fan of the band Coin.
I don't think I know who they are.
They're alt rock pop, but I feel like that. vocal writer has such a cool take on melodies. I could see that genre, like kind of in the alt pop space. I could see something like that.
I was thinking like Sam Smith kind of thing or something would be interesting.
Yeah, I don't sing like him.
But that's sort of vibe. Yeah.
I'm more songbird and he's more rich soul, just whatever he is.
But that kind of like dark alt kind of pop vibe, I think, is where you would fit. Yeah,
that could be cool.
Yeah. Well, I do have to ask about the allegations. Not necessarily like I don't, I saw that stuff on Reddit. I don't really know all the details, and I didn't really follow all of them. But tell us, like, I want to give you the opportunity to sort of talk about where everything's landed. Give us your side of it. And, Gavin Dance said that didn't play a role in you leaving the band. And sort of, what's your take on that?
Yeah. So the allegations, when the first one came out, essentially, I got like texts about it. There was like a problem, management told me, hey, there's a fucking problem. You gotta check this out. Opened it up and read it, and it was like, okay, well, I kind of, without sounding too like crass about it, was relieved when I read it, because I was like, oh, this is all 100% bullshit. This is going to be super easy to disprove. Like, I still have text messages that basically disprove all of this. And the band was there for like before, during, after that little time period. So, they immediately completely backed me up. They were like, yeah, we were there. This is complete bullshit. So that's the first allegations. And I supplied the text messages. I told my side, and I pretty much was like, okay, I think this is going to be over today. Like, this person is obviously, like, some of the stories that she made up, like even the time and the place and the location were like completely made up. It was like she was writing a story.
There was one where she somebody like literally made it up just to sort of prove a point, wasn't it? Wasn't there one like that?
No, I don't think she ever.
I thought I don't know if it's this one, but I thought there was someone who totally made up a story and then was like, I made this up just to show you guys that people on Reddit will believe things. Maybe I'm wrong.
I have a personal memory of that, but no, that's not the one that I'm talking about. The first one that was kind of like just fantasy storytelling, and the timelines didn't match up. Like I had the text messages to prove it. Okay, well, this happened on this day. I was actually in Seattle. Like,
right. It's literally physically impossible for this to happen.
And then all the stuff came out about her. Like, I don't want to get too into it. But
I don't even know all the details. So
bragging about it, stealing my underwear, like all that stuff, and it became like a whole thing where in my opinion, that first allegation, it was an attention grab on her side, and honestly, there's no merit to any of the stories. So that happened, and then the band completely backed me up. They're like, yeah, we were there. We know this is 100% bullshit. You would never do anything like that. And we know that you don't even talk like that. Like, there's no way these stories are true. And then there was the second allegation, which is, I think, where most people publicly kind of get hung up on, because the story is more realistic. You know what I mean? And parts of it are true. Like, we did meet up that day. There wasn't a date, and we, we did wind up sleeping together. But even those, and I told the band this, and it was backed up by them, backed up by everybody in my life, label producer or label management, heard my take on the story, and then, okay, this shouldn't be a problem either. So essentially in that story, there were a lot of things that she left out, and a lot of things that she exaggerated, and then some complete lies. And I also addressed that on Reddit and went through as specifically as I thought was like respectful to her.
Right.
But, and I think in hindsight, this might have been a mistake, because there was a part of me that was like, damn, if this is how you actually felt, like, I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry that you came out of that experience and assuming genuinely feeling this way. So I instead of being like, okay, here's what you left out, here's the specifics that I saw that happen, I basically went into, I didn't see it that way. I mean, in my eyes, everything was completely consensual, all the way to the point where, and I don't want to get too deep into this either, but to where it happened multiple times. So like in her story, where the first one was coercion, like, why did it happen again and again? And why did it seem like everything was hunky-dory at the end of the date? You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm not going to get too much more into detail about it. I probably got more into detail about it than I should have just now. But I think it's fine to talk about. Obviously, I was going to have to talk about it eventually.
Sure.
But then the band was like, yeah, like, we know the facts of this, like, we're fine with this. But there was something else that was kind of unavoidable that was happening around the time of like 2002 in the spring and beforehand. We were dealing with like tragic loss. My life was kind of wild.
A lot of shit going on all at the same time.
I'll say the band's like, hey, but we do need to address something else. Like, you know, you've essentially the past year or so, like, you've become a drunk, and like, we're very like Swanfest 2022. I think this is kind of where that seed started. Yeah, it was right after the crazy tragedy. I was grief stricken. I was nervous, all that stuff, and I like essentially drank my way into like a grief stricken breakdown for the show, and sang like, I don't know, maybe 50% of the set, and sang it not very well. And then after that, did the rest of the tour. That was the beginning of the tour. Did the rest of the tour sober. And, you know, the band, I was like, hey guys, let's tackle this after this tour. I'll do this tour sober. I'll like go ahead and figure out like the long-term solution later. And then those allegations popped up. And when I had gone home, I had gone back to drinking after the tour. So the band's like, hey, are you drinking now? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay, well, you gotta fucking get your shit together. Yeah. So that's when the hiatus happened, essentially. The 4 months of rehab, therapy, and, you know, confronted a lot of shit. And obviously there were other factors like, you know, that kind of period of my life got into situations where I even was sleeping around or dating around. Like that's not healthy, you know?
Yeah.
So the fact that I was even in a position where somebody could make an allegation where it's
Right.
like, hey, I know this dude, he's in that band and we stuck together and here's, you know what I mean? Like that
You
should
fucked up by even putting yourself in that situation. Yeah.
totally. So, yeah, so that happened. I came back. And I'll be like the first to admit my like battle in that department wasn't like, okay, you did the rehab, you did the therapy, you're better.
I mean, that's like, not how it works.
Yeah, there were some bumps in the road. So I think that was another factor. Like, you know, I was supposed to come back, be perfect, be like superhuman. And I wasn't. I was human.
Tilian went away and now he's all better and everything's great. Yeah. You know, he's model citizen. Yeah.
So,
which is a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I can say that now, I mean, comparing it to, you know, spring 2022 and just before that, it's like 100 times better in terms of how I deal with stress. But, you know, there were definitely bumps in the middle. And I think that's another factor of kind of the band supported me through all of the allegations in terms of evidence and what they thought was true. However, it still caused a shitload of stress, like toward all of us. So, you know, that's something that is kind of unavoidable to talk about because that's definitely a factor in terms. Because if everything was smooth sailing and firing on all cylinders, you know, maybe the creative differences aren't so bad. Yeah. So there's definitely other factors. And like I said before, it's so much more complicated than I'm even letting on now.
Sure.
And I only feel, what is the word? I only feel like able to tell my side of things. I'm not going to speak for the band. I'm not going to say what our conversations were. All I'm basically allowing myself to say is how I felt about it and what happened from my perspective. But yeah, so there's a lot of other factors as well. Like pretty much everyone else in the band, you know, they were getting married. They were like, you know, getting houses. Life was getting a little bit more serious. The risk-taking factor for them was not as high. They're like, well, we'd rather...
At the same time, you're kind of whiling?
Yeah, in this early time. And then, you know, after I settled myself and all that, it's just like all that still happened. You know, we can't take it off the table. It's not like everyone forgets everything. And then also just I don't know if you've ever been in a band with a drunk before.
I've been in life with many drunks many times.
It sucks. So the things that I said in that...
Like my mom.
Yeah. The things that I said, you know, in that little time period, like those things, they stick in your brain too. The way as I said, and the band very publicly, like other members in the past, you know, they've had their own struggles and they've had their own problems. Mine just happened to come during the peak of the whole band.
Yeah.
So
totally fair if you don't want to answer it, but I'm curious only because it might help someone else. But again, totally okay if you don't want to answer. Do you have any sense of why you were drawn to alcohol? Like, what is sort of the root of all of it?
Yeah, I think it was a spiral that was gradual at first. What's the expression where it's gradual and then all at once?
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, I probably, the first rock show I ever played, I drank before I went on stage to loosen up. And that just got, coasted for years and years. And then it was kind of like this thing where I'm like, okay, I play a show, have some drinks, go home, kind of just chill, don't need to drink, kind of recovering between tours and whatever. And then the COVID lockdowns were definitely somewhat of a turning point, where I tried to remain. I did 2 albums. I tried to remain productive, but it definitely got the best of me. And I remember it was like right before our comeback COVID tour. I was like, ooh, I think I might have a little bit of a problem. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. So I did a long sober streak right before the tour to try and just keep it at bay. And it worked. That tour was fine. I got sick, but everybody got sick. It was right during the Omicron shit.
Right.
And it was fine and it worked out. And then I was like, okay, cool, that worked. And then time went on, but I hadn't really addressed the issue. I was just like, okay, if I drink a little less for periods of time, I can kind of.
The issue meaning what? Like anxiety, or what is that thing?
Oh. I think it's just feeling emotions versus not being willing to emotions, and also loss, grief, regret, those all live in you. And if you don't go through them, you don't feel them. And grief, straight up, if you don't cry and without being inebriated or on some sort of drug, you're probably not going to get over it.
Right.
You go through the normal life feelings, And and then at the same time, I did actually started the therapy before the rehab portion I had already started, but doing that extensively is definitely helpful. But I think just the unwillingness to feel and feel discomfort for longer periods of time and feel like, oh, maybe I do have actual self-doubt that I have to grapple with. And it's not just I'm just hungover. That's why I feel this self-doubt. Once I'm not hungover, I won't feel it anymore. It's like, no, you just feel it more evenly. It's just not such a peak. So, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Just again, only asking because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this that are dealing with the same things, and I think it helps people to hear that.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think I'm in the position to be given a ton of advice yet. I still have
sure.
You know what I mean?
You got to be the newly sober guy that only talks about being sober and tells everyone else how to live after they've been sober for 10 days.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, anything else you want to add before I let you go? Obviously, everyone should check out the album. You just announced this tour. They should check that out too. Anything else?
Yeah, I'm just stoked for the future, and I feel excited to share what I've been making for years. And I think the only thing I didn't touch on is there's definitely some more insight to what I was going through and how I was feeling, all the different ranges of emotions on the album, because I wrote it over such a long period and over throughout all this. So just because there's a lyric on there that says something at the time that I wrote it doesn't mean that like stamp of approval. That's exactly how I'll feel for the rest of my life. But it has a crazy, complicated range of emotions on it, and it's, I don't know. I feel like it would be an interesting thing to listen to if anybody had been following my career up to this point.
And you can hear the vocals.
And you can hear the vocals very clearly.
Yes, you can. Cool. Well, I appreciate it. And I'll be excited to see the release.